Fokker Super Universal CF-AAM was fully assembled with all engine and flying controls connected and safetied. It was finally time to ask Transport Canada for a permit to fly. Throughout the 15-year restoration, Clark Seaborne and the restoration team were required to adhere to very specific protocols to ensure that AAM would be safe and legal to operate. Of primary concern was the 550 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp-H engine, which, at 878 pounds, weighed 200 pounds more than AAM's original 410 horsepower Wasp-B due to heavier construction and the addition of a valve oiling system. With the existing paperwork dating back 60 years, Transport Canada requested that a full structural analysis be completed on the front engine structure and engine mount to account for the added weight, thrust, and torque of the later model engine. Using the criteria established in the 1934 design documents, as well as more modern resources and Seaborne's office computer, the structural analysis was successfully completed and submitted for approval. After a thorough review, Transport Canada accepted the report. Another valuable piece of advice came from former de Havilland test pilot George Neal, who advised Seaborne to keep the Fokker center of gravity within the middle of the established limits and away from a nose-heavy configuration. It seemed this caution hadn't been observed in a test flight of a Fokker 2 years previously. After weighing the aircraft and marking the balance points, it was determined that 60 pounds of ballast was required to compensate for the heavier engine and propeller. A temporary tail skid, as original, was fitted for test flight purposes, but a tail wheel would be added later for operation on modern paved runways, at which time the ballast was dropped to 30 pounds. The initial engine run commenced on November 25, 1997, followed by sanctioned taxi tests the next day. These taxi tests, as the name suggests, were to be ground-only exercises, with no attempt made to fly. However, after spending decades on the ground, AAM appeared to be very eager to do just that. During one of the high-speed taxi tests on the undulating grass airfield, the Fokker bounced several feet off the ground before settling back to Earth. Finally, on July 24, 1998, Transport Canada granted their blessing to commence the test flight program. A 16-year dream was about to be fulfilled, but not without some trepidation. To roll down a 2,600-foot runway in a 70-year-old airplane with unknown stall characteristics, an untested overweight engine, and somewhat ineffective vintage brakes is not for the faint of heart.
So what are you going to do now?
Nothing.
Going to Disneyland?
No. Well done. It came off the ground and God, that must be now.
Good.
It's not a fast airplane.
If you can visualize a background of scrub pine and muskeg instead of this field of canola, you can probably imagine what that site looked like in the Arctic. And you can probably imagine, too, the sheer joy that Clark Seaborn feels flying the Universal once again 61 years after it crashed. Gord Kelly, CFCN News.
In late June of 1999, Transport Canada granted final approval and a certificate of airworthiness to CF-AAM, making it the only airworthy Fokker Super Universal in the world. And not a moment too soon. CF-AAM was about to make its first long trip and its grand entrance at one of the world's biggest annual air shows. Oshkosh features tens of thousands of experimental, current production, and antique aircraft from all corners of the globe. The question remained, would the 55-year-old engine stand up to the rigors of a long, hot summer trip over hundreds of miles of forests and lakes to fly into the busiest, most unruly airport in the world on a week when the skies were crowded by 12,000 mostly amateur pilots? At 10:04 in the morning, on July 21st, 1999, AAM departed Indus Airport and began its debut tour. The flight crew consisted of Seaborn, Bob Cameron, who had recovered AAM's remaining fuselage in 1974, and Don McLean, who had spent the last 7 years and countless hours as a key member of the restoration team. The Fokker Super Universal offered a very different experience in terms of operator comfort. The pilot was required to sit atop the oil tank, which averaged a temperature of 200 degrees Fahrenheit, while enduring a cockpit noise level measured at 149 decibels. The next morning, the team arrived in Winnipeg after a 3-hour, 10-minute flight from Regina. AAM had its first chance to see its future home. The support of the Western Canada Aviation Museum had made AAM's restoration possible with their supply of crucial artifacts. Although it was leased to Seaborn, it was the museum's airplane. Seaborn had agreed to restore the Fokker on the condition that, when complete, he would have the opportunity to fly it for 5 years before adding it to the museum collection. It was in Winnipeg that an unforeseen problem threatened to derail the trip. Gasket seals at the base of the magnetos had evidently dried up over the past 20 years, allowing black oil to leak across the back of the engine. McLean worked continuously for most of the next 2 days, and finally, mid-afternoon of July 22nd, AAM was ready to depart for Red Lake, Ontario, just in time to take in the Red Lake Norseman Festival. The world-famous Norseman was the brainchild of Bob Nordine, who had honed his engineering skills by designing the original Fokker Universal series of airplanes. Therefore, it was only fitting that AAM was celebrated as the grandfather of the legendary Norseman line. The AAM crew relished the opportunity to relax, swimming in the cool waters of Red Lake. AAM left Red Lake the following day en route to International Falls and the U.S. border. After clearing customs, the flight crew discovered that the electric starter clutch, which had possibly been saturated during the previous oil leaks, was beginning to slip on engagement, which meant that it was unable to turn the engine over with enough momentum to start.
And a wonderful leg on this flight ends at International Falls, where we can't get the airplane started again.
Cleanup work continued well into the night, and in the morning, July 27th, they tried again. The engine purred perfectly. After 3 hours and 30 minutes of flying time, AAM entered the busy traffic pattern over Oshkosh, Wisconsin. A short time later, it touched down and was marshaled towards a prominent spot in the front of the Vintage Aircraft Park. Upon opening the cockpit canopy and enjoying the cool 106-degree Fahrenheit weather, Seaborn noticed an elderly man standing in front of AAM. The man's first words were, "Gosh, I never thought I'd see one of these again." The man was 99-year-old John Miller, a pioneering U.S. aviator.
And so this day of airplane camaraderie ends with the group sitting around the tent.
Imaginary campfire. That's right. We had the imaginary guitar.
What's the song you want to sing, Bob?
You know me, Clark. I don't sing, and I don't tell stories.
Yeah, okay.
AAM's schedule that week included press gatherings, interviews, and formation flights with several magazine photographer groups. By the end of that year, the Fokker had been featured in at least 19 publications across North America, Britain, Holland, and France. And to top it all off, it was awarded the coveted Judge's Choice Award for newly restored aircraft. AAM greeted the new millennium with a very special appearance that recalled its previous life. The Calgary chapter of the Canadian Aviation Historical Society, which was holding its annual convention, suggested that AAM be involved in a historical reenactment of the 1930 Prairie Airmail Service on the 70th anniversary of its founding. On May 25th, with the cooperation of Calgary City Councillor Bob Hawksworth and the support of a local vintage car club, dozens of aviation enthusiasts descended on Indus Field to catch a glimpse of a bygone era. On July 14th, Seaborn, McLean, and Cameron set out with the Fokker on a western tour that took them over the Rocky Mountains, through the Port Hill, Idaho Customs Port, and on to historic Felts Field in Spokane, Washington. Felts Field, which was built in the late 1920s and featured a beautiful Art Deco terminal building, was home to the Northwest Biplane Fly-In. Although AAM was a wing short by definition of a biplane, the organization and members made the airplane and crew feel right at home. Departing Phelps Field, the crew flew north to Penticton, BC, to rendezvous with cinematographer Francois Arseneault, and then onward to Delta Air Park just outside Vancouver, where AAM was reintroduced to an old friend.
What engine did you finally end up with?
This is a H-Wasp.
An H? Oh, yeah.
Like a Norseman.
That's an airplane. With that engine in it.
Pilot Bob Randall, who had flown for George Simmons and Northern Airways out of Carcross, Yukon, was at 92 years of age the last surviving pilot of AAM in the 1930s.
Watch your head on the spar, it's still in the same place.
Hasn't moved. These chairs are in the same place too. I haven't seen this airplane since 37? It's a long time. Yeah. It runs good. Runs good. There's one thing I think I can safely say without fibbing. I'm the most fortunate guy in the world to have had a ride in an airplane that I used to fly 60 years ago. And it's running well, as it did then too. Thank you.
Wherever it went, CF-AAM, the only flight-worthy Fokker Super Universal in the world, was an immediate sensation. And with the arrival of the year 2001, its next journey became obvious. AAM was going home.